The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of the Vorian embassy as Ambassador Talon adjusted his ceremonial robes one final time. His three eyes studied the primitive datapad in his hands, displaying information about something, called a kindergarten. The word itself sounded barbaric in his language, like the growl of some wild beast. How could the humans expect him to learn anything from observing their youngest offspring? Behind him, Commander Brix and Scholar Nevin whispered in the ancient tongue of their homeworld. Their concern was obvious even without translation. The Vorian educational system had produced the galaxy's greatest minds for over 3,000 years. Their students spent decades in preparation before even beginning their formal studies. The idea that 5-year-old human children could teach them anything was insulting. The embassy doors opened with a soft hiss, and Dr. Emma Rodriguez stepped out into the morning light. She was smaller than most humans Talon had encountered, with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Her clothing was simple and practical, nothing like the elaborate academic robes worn by educators on Vorian Prime. "Ambassador Talon, welcome." "To Earth," she said, extending her hand in the peculiar human greeting ritual. "I hope your journey from the outer colonies was pleasant." Talon reluctantly touched her palm with one of his 6 fingers, suppressing a shudder at the informal contact. On his world, such casual touching between strangers was considered deeply inappropriate. "Dr. Rodriguez, we appreciate your willingness to participate in this cultural exchange, though I must admit we have reservations about the educational value of observing your youngest learners." Emma smiled, an expression that seemed genuine, rather than diplomatic. "I think you'll be surprised. Human children are remarkable in ways that might not be immediately obvious to outside observers. Shall we go?" The transport vehicle was another source of discomfort for the Vorian delegation. Instead of the silent enclosed pods they were accustomed to, this primitive automobile had windows that let in outside noise and distractions. As they drove through the human city, Talon observed the chaos of daily life with growing unease. Vehicles moved in seemingly random patterns, pedestrians crossed streets without apparent authorization, and everywhere there was noise, color, and unpredictable movement. "Tell me about your educational system," Emma said as they navigated through traffic. "I understand Vorian students don't begin formal learning until they're quite mature." Scholar Nevin leaned forward, his voice carrying the pride of centuries of tradition. "Our children undergo 47 years of mental conditioning before they're permitted to enter the academy. During this time, they develop focus, discipline, and respect for authority. Only then are they ready to begin absorbing knowledge without the contamination of untrained thoughts or premature questions." "Fascinating," Emma replied, though her tone suggested she found it anything but positive. "And how long does their education typically last?" "For most citizens, approximately 200 years, Talon answered, "though our greatest scholars continue learning for 3 or 4 centuries. By the time they complete their studies, they possess perfect knowledge in their chosen field, unclouded by doubt or unauthorized creativity." Emma was quiet for a moment, staring out at a group of children playing in a park as they passed. "That's certainly thorough. Our approach is quite different. Human children begin learning from birth, really. By age 3, they're asking questions about everything they encounter. By 5, when they enter kindergarten, they're ready to explore the world through play, experimentation, and social interaction." Commander Brix made a sound that might have been laughter if it weren't so clearly horrified. "You allow untrained minds to experiment without proper mental conditioning? How do you prevent them from developing dangerous, independent thoughts?" "We don't," Emma said simply. "Independent thinking is exactly what we want to encourage. The Vorian delegation fell silent, each lost in their own disturbed thoughts. On their world, independent thinking was a mental illness requiring immediate treatment. The idea that humans actively cultivated it in their young was beyond comprehension, as They pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Elementary School. Talon studied the building with growing bewilderment. It was small, colorful, and filled with windows. Children's artwork decorated the walls, displaying crude but enthusiastic attempts at creativity. Laughter and voices could be heard even from outside, a cacophony that would have sent any Vorian child into sensory overload. "Before we enter," Emma said, turning to face her guests, "I should explain a few things about human kindergarten. Our children are 5 and 6 years old, which I know seems impossibly young to begin education by your standards. They spend their day moving between different activities, playing games, telling stories, and working together on projects. It may seem chaotic to you, but there's purpose behind everything they do." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Human children learn best when they're active, curious, and engaged. We believe that a child who asks questions is learning more than a child who simply accepts information. We want them to think for themselves, to challenge ideas, and to find their own solutions to problems. Talon's skin changed color slightly, an involuntary response to extreme stress among his species. "You're describing anarchic behavior. How do you maintain order? How do you ensure they learn the correct information?" "We don't always worry about the correct information," Emma admitted. "Sometimes the most important thing is teaching them how to think, not what to think. A child who can question, explore, and adapt will learn far more in the long run than one who simply memorizes facts." As they walked toward the school entrance, the sound of children's voices grew louder. Through the windows, the Vorian delegation could see small humans moving about freely, some sitting on the floor, others standing at tables, a few lying on their stomachs while drawing. No adult seemed to be controlling their movements or directing their activities. "This is Ms. Patricia's classroom," Emma explained as they approached a door decorated with handprint paintings in every color imaginable. "She's been teaching kindergarten for 23 years. The children adore her, and she has a gift for helping them discover their own capabilities." Talon took a deep breath, trying to prepare himself for whatever barbaric educational practices awaited inside. In his mind, he was already composing the report he would send back to the Galactic Educational Consortium. This would be a fascinating study in primitive learning methods, perhaps useful for understanding why human society remained so chaotic and undisciplined. He had no idea that within the next few hours, everything he believed about education, intelligence, and the development of young minds would be completely overturned. The door opened, and 23 small humans looked up at their visitors with bright, curious eyes, ready to demonstrate capabilities that would shake the foundation of galactic civilization. The first thing that hit Ambassador Talon when he entered the kindergarten classroom was the noise. On Vorian Prime, educational facilities maintained perfect silence, broken only by the measured voice of an instructor delivering approved information. Here, 23 small humans chattered, laughed, and called out to each other in a symphony of chaos that made his sensitive hearing receptors ache. The second shock was the complete absence of individual learning pods. Vorian students sat in isolation chambers that prevented distraction and maintained focus on their lessons. These human children moved freely around the room, some clustered together at low tables, others sprawling on a carpeted area surrounded by colorful books, and a few standing at easels with brushes in their tiny hands. Ms. Patricia looked up from where she knelt beside a group of children building something with small wooden blocks. She was younger than Dr. Rodriguez, with bright clothing that would have been considered wildly inappropriate in any serious academic setting. Her smile was warm and genuine as she approached the visitors. "Welcome to our classroom," she said, her voice somehow carrying clearly over the background noise. "We're just starting our morning exploration time. Would you like me to explain what the children are working on?" Scholar Nevin's voice carried barely concealed horror. "They're not restrained to learning stations? How do you prevent them from becoming distracted or engaging in unauthorized activities?" Ms. Patricia laughed, a sound that somehow didn't seem mocking despite the absurdity of the question from her perspective. Distraction is part of learning at this age. Watch Tommy over there. He started building a tower, but now he's explaining to Lucy why he thinks certain blocks work better than others. He's learning about balance, weight distribution, and physics. But he's also developing communication skills and confidence in sharing his ideas. The Vorian delegation turned to observe the child in question. Tommy, who appeared impossibly small to be capable of any meaningful learning, was indeed constructing an elaborate tower while maintaining a constant stream of commentary to his companion. See, if you put the big one on top, it falls down. Tommy was explaining, demonstrating his point with a satisfying crash that made him giggle. But if you put the little ones on top of big ones, it stays up. It's like they're helping each other stay strong. Lucy nodded seriously, then added, "My dad says that's like how families work. The grown-ups hold up the little kids, and when the little kids grow up, they help hold up their kids." Commander Bricks made a strangled sound. These children were making connections between abstract concepts and real-world applications without any formal instruction. They were developing their own understanding through observation and discussion. On Vorian Prime, such unauthorized thinking would require immediate mental reconditioning. Across the room, another group of children had discovered something equally disturbing to the alien observers. A small human named Alex had mixed blue and yellow paint and was staring at the resulting green color with obvious excitement. "Look, look, I made a new color," Alex called out, holding up a brush dripping with green paint. "Blue and yellow makes green." Instead of correcting this unauthorized experimentation, Ms. Patricia moved closer and asked, "What do you think would happen if you mixed red and yellow?" "I don't know," Alex replied, already reaching for the red paint. "Let's find out." Within moments, Alex had discovered orange, and several other children had abandoned their activities to join the color experimentation. They were forming hypotheses, testing theories, and making discoveries through trial and error. The process was messy, uncontrolled, and completely contrary to every educational principle the Vorians held sacred. "Shouldn't you stop them?" Talon asked, watching paint spread across the table and onto the children's clothing. "They're creating disorder. They're wasting materials. They're not following any structured learning protocol." Ms. Patricia smiled as she helped a child named Rose mix red and blue to create purple. "They're learning the color wheel through direct experience. They're discovering that they can create something new by combining existing elements. They're developing hypotheses and testing them. This is science, mathematics, and creative problem-solving all rolled into one activity." She paused to help Rose clean her brush, then continued, "More importantly, they're learning that it's okay to experiment, to make mistakes, and to try new things. Those are skills they'll use for the rest of their lives." In the reading corner, another scene was unfolding that defied Vorian understanding of cognitive development. A group of children sat in a circle while one of them, a girl named Sophie, held up a picture book and read the story aloud. The Vorians could tell she wasn't actually reading the words, but rather making up a story based on the pictures. And then the rabbit said to the fox, "Why are you so sad?" Sophie narrated, showing a page with a droopy-eared fox sitting under a tree. And the fox said, "Because everyone runs away when they see me. They think I'm scary, but I just want to be friends." The other children listened intently, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions. When Sophie finished her improvised story, another child raised his hand and said, "I think the rabbit should invite the fox to play with all the other animals. Maybe if they got to know him, they wouldn't be scared anymore." "That's a good idea." "Ben," Ms. Patricia said, having drifted over to listen, "what do you think the fox might be feeling when everyone runs away from him?" "Lonely," suggested one child. "Sad," offered another. "Maybe angry, too," added a third. "Sometimes when I'm sad, I get angry." The discussion continued with 5- and 6-year-old humans exploring complex emotional concepts, discussing empathy and social dynamics, and collaborating to create solutions to interpersonal problems. They were engaging in literary analysis, psychology, and conflict resolution without any formal training in these subjects. Ambassador Talon felt his world shifting beneath him. These children were demonstrating cognitive abilities that Vorian students didn't develop until decades into their formal education. They were thinking critically, making connections, and most terrifyingly, they were doing it all without supervision or direction from authority figures. The morning continued with more shocking revelations. During a mathematics activity, children used colorful manipulatives to explore basic addition and subtraction, but they were also discovering patterns, making predictions, and explaining their reasoning to each other. A simple counting exercise evolved into discussions about infinity when one child asked, "What's the biggest number there is?" "I don't think there is one," replied another child thoughtfully, "because you can always add one more." The art area revealed children creating not just pictures but stories, emotions, and personal expressions. They shared their work with each other, offering compliments and suggestions without any adult prompting. They were developing aesthetic appreciation, communication skills, and emotional intelligence through creative expression. Most disturbing of all was the complete absence of fear. Vorian children lived in constant anxiety about making mistakes, expressing unauthorized thoughts, or failing to meet academic standards. These human children approached each activity with enthusiasm and curiosity. When their block towers fell down, they rebuilt them. When their paintings didn't turn out as expected, they tried new techniques. When they didn't know an answer, they asked questions or worked together to find solutions. As the morning progressed, Ambassador Talon realized with growing alarm that he wasn't observing primitive education. He was witnessing the foundation of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to think, create, and adapt without fear of failure or punishment. These 5-year-old humans were already more intellectually flexible than most adult Vorians. The implications were staggering, and the morning was far from over. The soft chime that signaled story time sent 23 human children scrambling toward the carpeted area in the center of the classroom. Ambassador Talon observed this migration with the fascination of a xenobiologist studying an alien species. The children moved without commands or threats, simply responding to an audio cue with enthusiasm rather than the fearful compliance he expected. Ms. Patricia settled into a low chair surrounded by her students, who arranged themselves in a loose circle on the floor. Some sat cross-legged, others lay on their stomachs, and a few leaned against nearby furniture. The casual disregard for formal positioning would have horrified any Vorian educator, yet somehow the group maintained attention and focus. "Today we're going to read Where the Wild Things Are," Ms. Patricia announced, holding up a book with a colorful cover depicting strange creatures. "Who can tell me what they think this story might be about just from looking at the cover?" Hands shot up immediately, and the Vorian delegation watched in amazement as children offered predictions based on visual evidence. They discussed the expressions on the creatures' faces, speculated about the relationship between the small human figure and the larger beasts, and made connections to their own experiences with imagination and play. Scholar Nevin leaned toward his colleagues and whispered, "They're engaging in analytical thinking before they've even heard the story. This is impossible at their developmental stage." The story began, and what followed challenged every assumption the Vorians held about young minds and learning capacity. These weren't passive recipients of information sitting silently while an adult read to them. They were active participants in the narrative experience. When Ms. Patricia read about Max being sent to his room without supper, a child named David raised his hand. Why was Max's mom so angry? Maybe she was tired and didn't know how to handle his energy better. "That's an interesting observation, David," Ms. Patricia replied. "What do you think Max was feeling when he was sent to his room?" "Mad," several. Children chorused, but then the discussion deepened. "Maybe he was sad, too," suggested a girl named Emma. "Sometimes when grown-ups are upset with me, I feel sad inside even if I act mad on the outside." "Yeah," agreed another child, "and maybe he was sorry but didn't know how to say it." Commander Brix felt his breathing become shallow. These 5-year-old humans were demonstrating emotional intelligence that surpassed many adult Vorians. They were analyzing character motivations, exploring the complexity of human emotions, and making sophisticated connections between behavior and underlying feelings. The story continued, and the children's engagement only intensified. When Max's bedroom transformed into a forest, they discussed imagination versus reality without becoming confused about which was which. When the wild things appeared, they debated whether Max was dreaming or using his creativity to cope with difficult emotions. "I think the wild things are all the angry feelings inside Max," offered a boy named Sam. "Like when I'm really mad, it feels like there's a monster in my chest roaring." The metaphorical thinking displayed by this comment left the Vorian delegation speechless. Sam had independently identified symbolic representation in literature, a concept that their own students didn't encounter until decades into their formal education. As the story progressed, the children began creating alternative narratives. "What if Max's mom came to check on him and found the forest?" asked one. "What if the wild things were real and followed him home?" wondered another. They were exploring plot possibilities, considering character development, and engaging in creative storytelling that built upon the original narrative. When Max became king of the wild things, the children discussed leadership, power, and responsibility with a sophistication that defied their apparent age. "Being in charge isn't just about telling everyone what to do," observed a girl named Kate. "Max had to figure out how to make the wild things happy, and that's hard work." "Yeah. And he got lonely being the boss," added another child. "Sometimes it's better to be with people who love you than to be the most important person." The discussion of Max's eventual return home sparked conversations about family, belonging, and the balance between independence and connection. These children were grappling with complex psychological and social concepts through the medium of a simple picture book. After story time, the children moved to various activity centers, but the learning continued in ways that astounded their alien observers. In the science corner, a group was investigating which objects floated and which sank in a large water table. What should have been simple observation had evolved into sophisticated hypothesis testing. "I think heavy things sink and light things float," announced a boy named Ryan, placing a wooden block in the water and watching it bob on the surface. "But this coin is really small and light." "And it sank," countered a girl named Lily, demonstrating with a penny. "Maybe it's not about heavy and light," suggested another child. "Maybe it's about what things are made of." They tested various objects, forming theories, adjusting their hypotheses based on new evidence, and collaborating to understand the principles of density without ever hearing the word. They were conducting genuine scientific inquiry, driven by curiosity rather than curriculum requirements. The Mathematics Center revealed equally impressive cognitive development. Children were exploring patterns using colorful blocks and beads, but their investigations went far beyond simple counting. They discovered that patterns could be extended, modified, and combined. They created increasingly complex sequences and challenged each other to identify the underlying rules. "Look, I made a pattern that goes big, small, big, small, big, small," demonstrated a girl named Zoe. "But what if I change it to big, small, small, big, small, small?" Her companions studied the new sequence, discussed how it differed from the original, and began creating their own variations. They were exploring mathematical concepts of sequence, variation, and rule-based systems through play. In the dramatic play area, children had established an elaborate scenario involving a restaurant, complete with menus, customers, and staff. The Vorian observers watched in fascination as these young humans negotiated roles, solved logistical problems, and adapted their play in response to new challenges. "We need more chairs for all the customers," declared the self-appointed restaurant manager. "We could use the blocks to make chairs," suggested the chef. "But then we won't have enough blocks for the kitchen," pointed out a server. The group collaborated to find solutions, compromising and adapting their play to accommodate everyone's needs. They were learning negotiation, resource management, and creative problem-solving through imaginative play. What horrified the Vorian delegation most was the complete absence of adult control over these learning experiences. Ms. Patricia moved through the room, asking questions and offering materials, but she never dictated what the children should discover or how they should think about their experiences. She facilitated their exploration without controlling their conclusions. "How do you ensure they learn the correct information?" Ambassador Talon finally asked, his voice strained with disbelief. Ms. Patricia paused in her observation of a group building an elaborate city with blocks, and looked at him thoughtfully. "We've found that when children discover things for themselves, they understand them more deeply than when they're simply told what to think. A child who figures out why some objects float and others sink will remember that principle forever because it came from their own investigation." She gestured toward the classroom full of actively engaged learners. "These children are developing critical thinking skills, creativity, and confidence in their ability to understand the world around them. Those abilities will serve them well, no matter what specific information they need to learn later." The implications of what they were witnessing began to crystallize in Talon's mind. These weren't just children playing games. They were developing the cognitive flexibility, creative problem-solving abilities, and collaborative skills that made humanity such a formidable presence in galactic affairs. The foundation of human achievement wasn't being laid in their universities or research institutes. It was being built right here, in kindergarten classrooms across their planet, by 5-year-old children who were learning that thinking for themselves wasn't just permitted, it was encouraged. The announcement of recess sent a wave of excitement through the kindergarten classroom that made Ambassador Talon's sensitive nervous system recoil. 23 small humans burst into motion, grabbing jackets and racing toward the door with an enthusiasm that suggested they were escaping rather than transitioning to another educational activity. The Vorian delegation followed Ms. Patricia outside, expecting to observe some form of structured physical training or supervised exercise period. What they found instead was pure, organized chaos that challenged every assumption they held about social development and leadership structures. The playground was a sprawling area of grass, climbing equipment, and open space where children from multiple classrooms mixed freely. There were no assigned positions, no adult-directed activities, and no apparent supervision beyond a few teachers scattered around the perimeter. The human young were left to organize themselves, and somehow, impossibly, they did. Commander Brix watched in fascination as a group of children near the swings began negotiating, turn-taking without any adult intervention. "You can swing for 100 pushes, then it's my turn," suggested a girl named Maya to a boy who had just climbed onto the swing. "But I can't count to 100 yet," the boy replied honestly. "I'll count for you," offered another child who had been waiting. "When I get to 100, you switch with Maya, and when Maya gets to 100, it's my turn." The system worked flawlessly, with children monitoring themselves and transitioning smoothly between turns. They had created a fair, efficient system for sharing resources without any external authority imposing rules upon them. Near the climbing structure, an even more complex social organization was emerging. A girl named Rebecca had assumed a leadership role, organizing an elaborate game that seemed to involve rescuing stuffed animals from various heights on the playground equipment. She assigned roles based on individual capabilities, matched tasks to interests, and adapted the game rules as new children joined. "Kevin, you're really good at climbing, so you can be the mountain rescue team," she directed. "Sarah, you're fast. so you can be the ambulance that takes the animals to safety. Tom, you like to organize things, so you can be the hospital where we take care of them. Scholar Nevin pulled out his recording device, his hands trembling slightly as he documented what he was witnessing. The leadership roles are shifting based on situational requirements and individual strengths, he whispered to his colleagues. No one assigned Rebecca to be the leader. She emerged naturally, and the others accept her authority because she's effectively organizing an activity they all want to participate in. The game evolved rapidly as more children joined. New roles were created, rules were modified to accommodate different skill levels, and conflicts were resolved through group discussion rather than authoritarian decree. When two children disagreed about whether stuffed animals could be injured, in their rescue scenario, the group debated the question and reached a consensus that satisfied everyone. They're demonstrating adaptive leadership, collaborative decision-making, and conflict resolution skills, Commander Bricks observed, his voice carrying a note of panic. These are advanced social and political competencies that our own citizens don't develop until their second century of life. On another section of the playground, a different group had discovered an ant hill and was conducting an impromptu biological investigation. They observed the insects' behavior, formed theories about their social structure, and designed experiments to test their hypotheses. I think they're carrying food back to their families, suggested a boy named Marcus, watching ants transport crumbs across the sidewalk. Let's put different kinds of food near their house and see what they like best, proposed his companion, already gathering various organic materials from the playground. They created controlled experiments, made predictions, and recorded their observations with the enthusiasm of professional researchers. When their investigation attracted other children, they shared their findings and taught newcomers how to observe ant behavior without disturbing the colony. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the alien delegation's reactions, moved closer to Ambassador Talon. "What are you thinking?" she asked gently. Talon's skin had shifted to a pale blue color that indicated extreme stress among his species. Dr. Rodriguez, these children are displaying cognitive and social capabilities that our educational system considers advanced achievements. They're solving complex problems, negotiating social situations, and conducting scientific investigations, with no formal training whatsoever. He paused, watching a group of children organize themselves into teams for an elaborate game that seemed to combine elements of strategy, physical activity, and storytelling. On Vorian Prime, we spend decades conditioning our young to follow established protocols and accept received wisdom. We consider independent thinking and creative problem-solving to be dangerous mental aberrations that must be corrected. And yet, Dr. Rodriguez observed, your species has made remarkable contributions to galactic civilization. Your technological achievements and scholarly works are respected throughout known space. But not innovations, Talon admitted reluctantly. We excel at perfecting existing knowledge and maintaining established systems. We're not creators or inventors. We don't adapt well to unexpected situations or develop novel solutions to emerging problems. He gestured toward the playground, full of human children. These abilities you're nurturing in your young, this comfort with uncertainty and change, this collaborative approach to problem solving, these are precisely the skills that have made humanity such a disruptive force in galactic affairs. Near the basketball court, another scene was unfolding that illustrated his point. A mixed-age group of children was attempting to play a game, but the significant size differences between 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds was creating obvious challenges. Instead of abandoning the activity or accepting unfairness, they began modifying the rules. The little kids can shoot from closer, suggested an older child, and they get 2 points for every basket instead of 1. What if we played in teams with big kids and little kids mixed together? Offered another. Then it would be fair for everyone. They experimented with different approaches, adjusting and readjusting their game until they found a version that was engaging and equitable for all participants. They had identified a problem, generated multiple solutions, tested their ideas, and reached a consensus that satisfied everyone involved. The process was remarkably similar to the diplomatic negotiations that resolved interspecies conflicts. At the galactic level, Commander Brix had been circulating among different groups of children, documenting their activities with growing alarm. He returned to his colleagues with his recording device full of disturbing evidence. "I've observed 17 different instances of spontaneous leadership emergence," he reported quietly. The children transitioned seamlessly between following and leading based on expertise, interest, and situational demands. They're demonstrating political sophistication that would be impressive in adult citizens of any species. He consulted his notes, his voice becoming increasingly strained. "I've also documented collaborative problem-solving, resource sharing, conflict mediation, cross-cultural communication between different age groups, and adaptive strategy modification in response to changing circumstances. They're displaying every skill set that we associate with successful galactic diplomats and military strategists," Scholar Nevin added his own observations. "The scientific thinking is particularly disturbing. They form hypotheses based on limited data, design experiments to test their theories, and modify their understanding based on results. They're comfortable with uncertainty and failure, treating both as learning opportunities rather than sources of shame or punishment." The three Vorians fell silent, watching the human children play with a new understanding of what they were actually observing. This wasn't recreational activity or unstructured free time. This was advanced social, cognitive, and emotional training, disguised as fun. A small group of children approached the visiting aliens with the fearless curiosity that characterized their species. "Are you from space?" asked a girl named Ashley, studying Talon's unusual appearance with open fascination rather than fear. "We are from another world, yes," Talon replied carefully. "That's so cool," exclaimed a boy named Jason. "Do you have kids on your planet? Do they play games like we do?" The innocent question struck at the heart of what the Vorian delegation was beginning to understand. Their own children didn't play games. They didn't ask questions. They didn't approach strangers with curiosity rather than fear. They were conditioned from birth to accept authority, follow protocols, and avoid the kind of independent thinking that these human children demonstrated naturally. As recess ended and the children reluctantly returned to their classroom, Ambassador Talon realized that his mission had fundamentally changed. He had come to Earth expecting to observe primitive educational practices that might provide insight into human behavioral patterns. Instead, he had discovered the source of humanity's greatest strength, and the implications were terrifying. These 5-year-old humans were already more cognitively flexible, socially sophisticated, and creatively capable than most adult members of his own species. If this was how human education began, what would these children be capable of by the time they reached maturity? The question kept Talon awake for many nights afterward, and the answer would reshape galactic civilization's understanding of human potential. The conference room aboard the Vorian research vessel felt smaller than usual as Ambassador Talon faced his colleagues 3 days after their visit to the human kindergarten. The ship's AI had already processed their recordings and observations, generating preliminary analyses that confirmed what they all feared to acknowledge. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, filled with the weight of implications. None of them wanted to voice. Commander Brix was the first to break the quiet, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I've reviewed the data 17 times. The conclusions remain consistent. Those human children demonstrated cognitive abilities that exceed our adult population in multiple categories." Scholar Nevin nodded reluctantly, his usually steady hands trembling as he consulted his notes. "The creative problem-solving indices alone are off our measurement scales. When little Rebecca organized that rescue game, she displayed leadership adaptability that would qualify her for advanced military strategy courses on our homeworld. She's 5 years old. Talon stared out the viewport at Earth, watching the blue and white planet rotate peacefully below them. Such a small, unremarkable world to harbor such revolutionary educational practices. "What are our options?" he asked, finally. "We could classify the report," suggested Brix. "Mark it as sensitive information requiring security clearance. Limit distribution to the highest levels of the educational consortium." "And accomplish what?" Nevin countered. "Delay the inevitable? Other species will conduct their own observations eventually. The humans aren't hiding their methods. Dr. Rodriguez invited us to observe their kindergartens with complete openness." Talon activated the room's central display, and holographic images of the human children filled the space around them. Tommy building his towers while explaining physics concepts. Alex discovering color theory through experimentation. Sophie creating stories that explored complex emotional themes. David analyzing character motivations with psychological insight that surpassed trained adults. "Look at them," Talon said softly. "Really look at them. These aren't just children playing games. These are the future leaders, scientists, diplomats, and innovators of the galaxy's most unpredictable species. And they're learning to think without boundaries from the moment they can walk and talk." He manipulated the display to show their recordings from the playground. Children organizing themselves into complex social structures, negotiating resource distribution, resolving conflicts through collaborative discussion, and adapting to changing circumstances with remarkable flexibility. "Every assumption we've made about cognitive development is wrong," Talon continued. "We've been conditioning our young to accept authority and follow established patterns for 3,000 years, believing this creates stability and prevents dangerous thinking. Meanwhile, the humans have been encouraging their children to question everything, experiment freely, and solve problems creatively." Commander Brix pulled up comparative data from their homeworld. "Our greatest minds take centuries to achieve, the kind of flexible thinking these kindergarten children display naturally. We've created a civilization of specialists who excel within narrow parameters but struggle with unexpected challenges or novel situations." The weight of this realization settled over them like a heavy blanket. Their entire educational philosophy, the foundation of Vorian civilization, had been revealed as fundamentally flawed. Not wrong in its achievements, perhaps, but catastrophically limited in its scope. "There's something else," Scholar Nevin said quietly, activating another section of their data. "I've been analyzing human historical records, trying to understand how their educational methods developed. What I found is disturbing." The display shifted to show human technological and social progress over the past several centuries. Their rate of innovation has been accelerating exponentially. New discoveries, artistic movements, scientific breakthroughs, and social reforms emerge from their society at a pace that defies mathematical modeling, and it all traces back to this fundamental approach to early childhood education. Talon studied the data with growing unease. They're not just teaching their children to think independently, they're creating a species-wide culture of innovation and adaptation. Every generation builds on the creative achievements of the previous one, but with cognitive tools that are continuously refined and improved. "Exactly," Nevin confirmed. "While we spend centuries perfecting existing knowledge, they spend decades creating entirely new fields of understanding. While we maintain social stability through rigid hierarchies, they generate progress through collaborative creativity." The implications were staggering. Human superiority in galactic affairs wasn't due to superior technology or natural intelligence. It was the result of an educational system that produced adults who could think flexibly, adapt rapidly, and collaborate effectively in the face of unknown challenges. Commander Brix activated the communication array. "Sir, what do we tell the educational consortium? How do we explain that everything we thought we knew about learning and development is obsolete?" Talon was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. The report they would submit could trigger panic across dozens of worlds. Species that had built their entire civilizations on rigid educational models would face the possibility that they had been fundamentally wrong for millennia. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We document everything we observed, analyze the implications honestly, and let the consortium decide how to respond." Over the next several days, they crafted their report with meticulous care. The document they produced was titled The Human Kindergarten, an analysis of uncontrolled cognitive development and its strategic implications. It detailed every aspect of their observations, from the creative problem-solving they witnessed in 5-year-old children to the sophisticated social organization that emerged naturally during playground activities. The report didn't just describe what they had seen. It analyzed the long-term consequences of human educational philosophy, traced connections between early childhood experiences and adult capabilities, and projected the likely trajectory of human development over the coming centuries. Recommendation 1. Talon dictated to the ship's AI. The Educational Consortium should immediately begin pilot programs incorporating human-style early childhood development methods. Traditional conditioning protocols should be maintained for comparison, but alternative approaches must be tested. Recommendation 2. Species currently employing rigid educational models should prepare for significant social and economic disruption as human-educated populations demonstrate increasing advantages in innovation, adaptation, and collaborative problem-solving. Recommendation 3. Long-term strategic planning must account for accelerating human cognitive development. Current projections of human capabilities based on traditional educational models are likely to prove dramatically insufficient. The report concluded with a sobering assessment that would haunt galactic leaders for years to come. Humanity's educational approach produces individuals who are comfortable with uncertainty, skilled at collaborative problem-solving, and capable of rapid adaptation to novel circumstances. These abilities compound over generations, creating a species-wide advantage that will likely prove decisive in any long-term competition for resources, territory, or influence. When the report was finally transmitted to the Galactic Educational Consortium, the response was immediate and galaxy-wide. Some species dismissed the findings as impossible exaggeration. Others quietly began implementing experimental programs based on human methods. A few banned human educational consultants from their worlds entirely, fearing the social upheaval that independent thinking might cause. Dr. Rodriguez received the first communication requests within hours of the report's distribution. Educational delegations from a dozen worlds wanted to visit Earth, study human kindergartens, and understand how such remarkable results were achieved. She found herself coordinating visits from species she had never heard of, all desperate to learn the secrets of human cognitive development. The crystalline hegemony, known for their mathematical precision and logical thinking, sent a delegation specifically to observe human children's approach to problem-solving. The aquatic collective wanted to understand how human children learned, to collaborate so effectively. The mechanical union, a species of artificial intelligences, sought to comprehend how biological minds could achieve such cognitive flexibility. Within a year, human kindergarten teachers had become the most sought-after educational consultants in the galaxy. Universities across hundreds of worlds established departments of human developmental studies. The phrase kindergarten methodology entered galactic common language as shorthand for innovative, adaptive thinking. But the most profound changes occurred on the worlds that actually implemented human-style early childhood education. Children who had been conditioned for decades to accept authority without question began asking why instead of what should I do. Young minds that had been trained to fear mistakes started treating failure as valuable learning experiences. The social implications were revolutionary. On worlds where questioning authority had been considered mental illness, entire generations began to challenge established systems and propose alternative solutions. Rigid hierarchies that had maintained stability for millennia found themselves under pressure from citizens who expected to participate in decision-making rather than simply follow orders. Ambassador Talon, watching these changes unfold from his position at the Educational Consortium, realized that their simple observation mission had triggered the largest educational revolution in galactic history. The human kindergarten model wasn't just changing how other species taught their children. It was fundamentally altering the balance of power between civilizations. 5 years after his visit to Riverside Elementary, Talon received a message from Dr. Rodriguez. She was writing to thank him for his report and to share some news. Ms. Patricia's kindergarten class, the one they had observed, was now in 5th grade. The children had continued to demonstrate remarkable academic achievement, but more importantly, they had maintained their curiosity, creativity, and collaborative spirit. Tommy is now designing robots that can build themselves, Rodriguez wrote. Alex is creating mathematical art that combines color theory with geometric principles. Sophie is writing stories that help other children understand complex emotions. David is leading peer mediation sessions that resolve conflicts more effectively than many adult counselors. She concluded her message with an observation that sent chills through Talon's nervous system. These children are 10 years old now, and they're already thinking about problems we haven't even discovered yet. By the time they reach adulthood, they'll be capable of achievements we can't currently imagine. The kindergarten you observed wasn't just teaching them facts or skills. It was preparing them to reshape the galaxy. Sitting in his office aboard the consortium headquarters, Ambassador Talon stared out at the stars and contemplated the future. Somewhere among those distant points of light, human children were playing games that taught them to think without limits, asking questions that had no easy answers, and learning that failure was just another word for try again differently. The galaxy's most elite academies, with their centuries-long programs and sophisticated conditioning protocols, now understood why humanity consistently produced the most innovative scientists, adaptable diplomats, and creative problem solvers in known space. The secret hadn't been hidden in their universities or research institutions. It had been there all along, in the bright, noisy, chaotic kindergarten classrooms where 5-year-old humans learned that thinking for themselves wasn't just allowed, it was the most important skill they could ever develop. And that realization had changed everything.